Welcome back to Dynamics Compass, where we interview the Dynamics experts so you don't have to figure it out the hard way. Today I'm talking with Michael Petersen, Chief Technology Officer at Next365 Group, and someone who spent the better part of 25 years implementing Microsoft Dynamics solutions, which means he's seen enough ERP disasters to know exactly what not to do. Michael's not your typical CTO. He's been in the trenches at Avanade for over 12 years, architecting enterprise-level implementations worth 20 million to 100 million, managing development teams across multiple countries, and telling clients things they probably didn't want to hear, but absolutely needed to. He's worked with everyone from mid-market manufacturers to massive enterprises, helped companies migrate from Great Plains, architected integrations that actually work, and most importantly, he's developed some pretty strong opinions about how the Dynamics ecosystem is evolving. Opinions like customization shouldn't happen, data migration should be your biggest cost, and Business Central's days might be numbered. Now, whether you agree with those statements or not, Michael's track record means he's earned the right to make them. And for anyone implementing D365 F&O or planning a Great Plains migration before 2031's deadline, this conversation is going to give you a perspective you won't hear from your implementation partner's sales team. Michael, welcome to Dynamics Compass.
Thank you very much, Rory. It's good to be here.
Yeah, that's a real pleasure. But a question I'd like to ask for anyone that's here, just so the audience gets to be a bit familiar with you and break the ice. Could you share something about yourself that not a lot of people know about you?
So, a lot of people aren't going to know this because it's a more recent fact, but I have actually taken up baking, and I'm talking pastry type baking as a hobby over the
Oh, yeah?
last couple of years. Learning it piece by piece, but I find it relaxing because it's a different type of technical activity. Baking's very measurement oriented, very tight specifications to get the outcomes that you want.
Yeah.
And it's not technology, so to speak. So it's a good
Yeah.
way. My brain just works that way, and it helps me relax and helps me get away from work. So not a whole lot of people know that I'll use the term guinea pigs that get to try out all of my pastry as it
Yeah.
comes out do know, but there are not very many people that are aware of that.
So, do you have a favorite? Like one of my favorites is like almond croissant, but what's your favorite pastry
So I'm
that you
getting into croissants right now, to be honest with you. But I just came out of a phase where I was doing a lot of work with choux pastry and a lot of cream puffs and things of that variety. I
yeah.
actually did a caramel cream puff with a stabilized hazelnut whipped cream on the inside. That was
Oh, yeah.
really good. Again, very technical to get the space in the middle and be able to fill it and things like that. But
Yeah.
it was a lot of fun and it came out really good.
Yeah. That sounds pretty cool. I I'm a big donut fan as well, and when I lived in Australia, I think they also struggled getting the filling in the middle. So what they just did, they would just put a syringe in it. You would buy it with the syringe, and you just had to inject the filling yourself.
You could
Uh,
fill it as much as you wanted to, huh?
exactly, and I guess that made it easier for them to create it as well.
Well, and it can last a little bit longer too for them. So,
Exactly. Yep. Well,
okay.
that's a very interesting fact. Thanks for sharing. Um, all right, diving into the meaty stuff and immediately about one of your opinions, because when you and I met, you've made the bold statement that customizations shouldn't happen. For the CFO or IT director listening who just inherited a system with hundreds of customizations, what's the core problem you're seeing?
So it actually falls a little bit further into customization shouldn't happen inside of the ERP system itself. And what I mean by that is there's a lot of facilities now to be able to do logic customizations, things of that variety outside of finance and operations or finance and supply chain management, which is where a majority of my career has been spent with AX and supply chain management. But the reality is the more customizations you make within the application itself, especially complex logic customizations, things of that variety, you run into problems where you end up slowing down the system, where you end up customizing yourself into a corner that you're unable to upgrade. the system, which means you're completely rebuilding the system every 7 to 10 years when you go through. In more recent times, when we've moved into the cloud with the system, a lot of the reasons why people have had to upgrade and move into new systems have gone away. Previously, it was either the system that you were using went out of service, such as GP is doing right now. We have an end-of-life announcement on GP. And even versions went out of service. Capabilities were put into the system, newer versions that perhaps you needed or wanted to be able to use. So you would move to that new system, or you customized yourself to a point where you were unable to absorb your new business processes. And, the first two really have kind of gone away because you're getting cloud updates all the time. You don't really get a new system per se, and you get access to all the new features that are available within those systems. So you don't need to worry about those things. One thing I forgot to mention is possibly your supplier just disappears. They get out of the business. Maybe they're acquired by somebody else, such as PeopleSoft being purchased by Oracle, things of that variety. Maybe you don't want to be under Oracle's umbrella, and therefore your choice is to move away from PeopleSoft. It's not going to be there anymore. I don't think anybody believes that Microsoft is going anywhere at this point. It's a pretty solid company, to say the very least. Yeah. And so that also is taken away as a possibility. The application, the company going away. So really, if you have to completely revamp and re-implement your entire ERP system at a very substantial cost, you've probably done it to yourself at some point and customized yourself to the point where that is going to be a problem.
Yeah. When you say customization shouldn't happen, are you talking about all customizations, or is there a line between necessary business logic and problematic modifications?
There's a couple of different lines that sit out there. One of them is tied to, again, changing the way at the base level that the system works. That's a significantly problematic customization. There's layering business logic on top of things that get done. What I mean by that is perhaps you need some additional checks in the middle of a process, or you need to break a particular transaction down into multiple transactions, things of that variety. Those types of things, I personally, especially at this point with the way that Dataverse has been integrated into the system, would do that work within Dataverse and bring it back into the system after it's done. So again, you're protecting the transactional integrity of the system as it's made out of the box. And then you've got other ones where you're adding a piece of data where, maybe you're changing the order that data goes in, things of that variety. Those are innocuous changes, and I really don't feel they're problematic where it comes from. Your real problem starts to become when you're layering them on top of each other and you continue to get further and further away from the baseline. It becomes a real challenge. So you have to balance it. I'm not saying you don't do customizations. It's a matter of doing them in the right place, doing them in the right way, and protecting that integrity of the system as it's built, because that way as new features and new logic comes out from Microsoft, you have the capability of incorporating that because you haven't changed the way that base system is working. And then maybe you have to change your logic or what point you grab that information and make your changes. But you're not blowing up the entire system to try and figure out how to integrate that into the process.
Yeah. Okay. And with Microsoft's MCP Server 2.0 and the move toward Agentic AI, how does that change the customization conversation? Like, are we looking at a future where training an agent replaces traditional customization?
Well, you're looking at a future where training an agent replaces just about everything that goes on within the system, because realistically what you're seeing is that MCP server will be putting the information into the back end of the system, and the business process itself and the logic associated with the business process will be handled within the agents and within the language models. that are being put out. Whether you have your own language model that your particular enterprise is hosting on Azure that you've broken off, whether you're using a public one, there are a lot of different opportunities, and it doesn't all have to be one process. It can be a bunch of different ways that you go about doing that. But the reality is, in the long term, it will be a matter of training the language model in exactly what it is and how you want your business done, which is going to change a lot of things. A lot of organizations don't have their business processes currently documented, things of that variety, and that's one of the biggest ways of going about training those models, is pointing them out a library and saying, look through this is how we do business. And too many businesses right now, all of that is tribal knowledge and knowing exactly how their own systems work and how they've gone about it in the past and things of that variety. So what will happen is the language model will have to go in and look at the transactions and try to figure out how the business processes are being done, how that data is being done, without it necessarily being explicitly laid out. And that's going to make it a much longer process getting those language models trained. Organizations that are stepping back right now, that are documenting their processes, that are making sure that they're utilizing some agentic AI, perhaps for some automations, things of that variety, and most importantly, getting their workforce ready for agents doing that work. That's going to be a big piece of the success, but the MCP server is really the keystone in version 2. So version 1 of the MCP server had, I think it's 13 different functions available within it. And what an MCP server does is it basically allows that language model, that agent, to interact with a system, dynamics. And it could do 13 different things. That was all it was able to do in version 1. So it was very notional, that it was useful as an MCP server overall, but it was certainly there, and it was certainly a way to show that there was at least the possibility of that working. MCP 2.0, the newer version that's in beta and is going to be released soon, you can run every functionality that's in the system. It's self-discovering. It's capable of going in and figuring out what it needs to do within the application and accessing the application from there. There is noise that it's capable of doing work through customizations that might already exist within the system. That, dependent upon how much reality there is to that, will be a boon to those that have customized their system heavily. It doesn't take away the problem of the business process possibly changing to the point where you can't continue to customize, but it gives you some chance to start to absorb and frankly get the advantages of using Agentic ERP, where you might not have otherwise. You might have had to start over right then in an attempt to get Agentic ERP going. So MCP 2.0 opens a lot of doors, and it's going to give us a lot of opportunities. But yes, the lack of customization in the long run is going to be better in an agentic world as well, and how you go about training that agent to do what it is you need it to do and how you need it to do it.
So what's the best alternative then? If you're thinking about the future and wanting to leverage as much as you can the new technology with MCP 2.0, companies shouldn't be customizing then, or as little as possible. Is the alternative go with vanilla F&O, or what is the alternative?
Again, we talk about this in a lot of different places, and you have to strike a balance just as you do with everything. Larger enterprises, you tend to they have customized because that's the way that ERPs were put in. For example, in the 80s and the 90s, you went in and you said, what do you want it to do? So that's one of the reasons SAP gets treated more as a platform than necessarily a system, and everything gets customized from end to end from an SAP standpoint. So those enterprises have very much customized what's going on. The problem is every last business process in this sprawling enterprise is tied to every other business process. So you start changing those business processes, and now you've got the knockdown effect into other things outside of the ERP that you need to deal with, which is one reason they keep putting the same thing back in, is they're trying to minimize that. For mid-size and smaller, if you have the ability to unwind those and understand why they were put into place, why was the customization there? Was it put there because, again, we just always have done the work in this particular way and there's not really a reason other than that? Or is there a true business value? Is it a differentiator for you and with your competitors into how you do work? And is it really a differentiator, or do you just think it's a differentiator? Things of that variety. Questions need to be asked. You need to understand. You need to ask some very hard questions. You should be doing this every time you do an ERP implementation anyway. Asking these hard questions and being able to come up with the answers and the things that truly do differentiate you, make you different, that give you value in some way, shape, or form. I'm all for customizing and finding the best place to do it. Whether that's inside the ERP system, whether that's within the Dataverse, whether it's something completely separate or something completely different. Again, the definition of what's best has so many factors tied to it, including the capability of whatever company it is to maintain that long term. Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of questions to ask. There's a lot of ways to go in. But what you shouldn't do is just say, oh, we're going to do it this way because this is the way we did it the last time around. That is not a valid thing. And when you do a customization, you should ask a lot of very hard questions about the why you're doing the customization.
Yeah. Then and then you could tie that into change management, and then we're having a whole other conversation as well.
Change management is a huge conversation around all of this. And again, in a smaller organization, the change management problem is different than it is in an enterprise. Understanding how much of that change is being lopped onto individuals rather than the challenge of change management between portions of the organization, things like that. It really does make a big difference. And a lot of times people don't even know what questions to ask when it comes down to it.
Yeah. Everything you've said, like we could do a deep dive on almost every question you've answered so far already, but there's other topics I want to touch on still. So I do want to move on, and at the end I want to give people the opportunity. Well, I want to give you the opportunity to share your contact details, that if anyone does want to dig a bit deeper with you, that they can contact you. But let's talk about something most important that most people underestimate. You've said that data migration should be the biggest cost of an implementation. Why is that so rarely the case, and what is the consequence of that?
First, people seem to think that data migration is going to be easy.
Yep.
Very often perhaps organizations have a data group, things of that variety, and there's a difference between moving around data and, again, maintaining transactional integrity of that data as it comes across, being able to identify what it is, things of that variety, making decisions around where do I start. I need to eventually go back and be able to use that data because it becomes part of my history to make things better, right? Yeah. So I try and get people to understand the way I see data, especially migrated data, is it's the equity in your system that you currently have in place. Yeah. You spent probably 7 to 10 years, some people longer, some people shorter, in that system. You've been putting business information into that system over that time. And when you move to a new system, really the only thing you have to do business on is that data that's out there. Yeah. And that's how important it is. The functioning of the system is important. The capabilities of the new system are important. But you're still doing business with the same customers. You're still doing the same business you were doing, the same activities. I'm assuming you're not completely changing to a different business in that time frame. So that's why the data migration is as important as it is, and taking the time to get it right is significant. Making sure it's correct when it goes in. On day one, when you flip everything on, you've got a lot of your smart people that have been doing this for a long time, whatever it may be that your business is, and your data. And that's all you've got. You've got a new system.
So,
And it's all got to continue to move forward. And frankly, if your customers never know you're going on to a new system, you have a very successful outcome, no matter how painful it was on the backside. And that's tied to knowing what it is that you've done with that customer before, knowing what they need, knowing how they need it, things like that, all
yeah,
tied to your data. That's why it's the most important. And that's frankly why, because it's not easy, why you really should be spending a lot on getting your data migration correct and getting the right plan to get it over into place and what you need to do that work.
yeah. So you're really highlighting that the importance of the data. The data is the asset of your business. Um, could it also be that the sponsors, the people involved on the client side, have never done a data migration, and they think it's a copy paste exercise and not that complex?
There are a lot of people that feel that way. Um, people that, and sometimes it's people that should know better. A
Yeah.
lot of times companies will have, especially mid-sized organizations, maybe they have one or two data people. Um, the responsibility of a day in and day out data person is very different than doing migrations.
Hmm.
And even knowing what questions to ask is sometimes just not present when you're doing that work. So it's a very complex set of factors, kind of like the customization question. There's no one size fits all for anything. How much do you bring over? How do you maintain other data that you're not bringing over? Do you bring it at a transaction level? Do you bring all kinds of questions that go into that, and the cost value questions that come out of it. And then it also affects your end users and how they interact with the system and how they do things within the system. Those decisions affect all of that. So making those decisions up front and making them early and working to that playbook can affect how you do your OCM, how you do your functional work,
Yeah.
because your functional work is tied to how your people are working on the ground.
Then it will probably come back as well to the whole, like the sales process, in emphasizing that the sales team or anyone involved in the sales process emphasizing how important data migration is, because I have heard stories where the clients don't appreciate the importance of it, and they're not willing to allocate the amount needed to it. So isn't it up to the partner then to make sure how the emphasis of the importance?
Herein is where there's kind of a challenge. I've lived on the sales side of this as well. I've done work for large enterprise sales. I've done work for smaller organization sales. I mean, this is a very expensive activity for any organization. It doesn't matter if you are a multinational with 800 locations and several $billion a year of revenue, or you are a much smaller organization running in 2 cities and 5 locations, and maybe you're 500 million a year.
Yeah.
At the end of the day, it is a very large undertaking to replace an ERP or to update an ERP, and so decisions do have to be made. And I think the challenge is we bring it out during the sales process, we make it very clear during the sales process, and at some point it overwhelms the people that we're talking to. There's so many factors that they're judging in, and it ends up being deprioritized because everything feels like it's a huge responsibility to get done, and to get done during this process. They get to that, I have a data department, I have a couple of data people, we'll just handle it. I can manage the cost that way. But again, there's a cost to that as well, just like taking people that are doing the SME work or stakeholder work out of the business day in and day out, taking those data people out of the business in that time frame and making them do that work especially making them do it in isolation where they're not really interacting as much with the partner as they might, maybe should, things of that variety. All
Yeah.
of that has a cost
Yeah.
outside, and being able to recognize what that cost and urging clients to at least consider those costs is I think sometimes a piece that goes in a little bit light.
Yeah.
But from a sales standpoint, you have to also respect what the client feels that they can do and what it is they know. When I'm outside of it in a situation like this, I can certainly have the conversation.
Yeah.
It's not what you think it is,
Yeah.
you know. But it's a lot harder to have that conversation, and even having that conversation in a during a sales cycle, sometimes it lands flat because again, there's so much coming in. They have to start deprioritizing something.
Hmm.
It's the OCM discussion. It's
Yeah.
all of these things. There's a very big difference between cottage OCM and an industrial type of OCM that can go with one of these things, and you have to balance that with your budget and what your people know and
Yeah.
all the pieces. It's all the same, but data tends to be the one that goes away early on. I'll take it.
Yeah.
And not recognizing what the challenges are and what the potential implications are of that has stalled and killed a lot more projects than anything else that I've seen.
Yeah. So that leads into the next question. I know you said there's never a one size fits all, but when you are advising a company on their implementation budget, like what percentage should they actually be allocating to data migration versus configuration and training
Honestly, it should probably be anywhere from 25 to 40% for data migration
of the
uh,
overall budget?
of the overall budget. And the thing that you have to remember in that is that's not just the act of moving the data, it's testing the data, it's doing it repeatedly, it's setting it up in a industrial fashion so that when you go live, what you're not waiting on is your data. You're checking it. The people know how to check it. There's a lot that goes into data, not just figuring out where to move it, but being sure that at go live it doesn't become a stumbling block, that you have a lot of plans. I've had instances where I was doing a data migration with a group of 10, 12 people. It was over 100 million records we were moving. I mean, this was a very large implementation. And we got to the point where we were loading that data every week. This was in AX 2009. This was a ways back.
Yeah.
But we practiced it over and over and over again. And part of the reason that we did that was because the system you're taking that data out of is constantly moving. It's constantly changing. Problems
Yeah.
you find and fix stay fixed most of the time. But then you've got the problem of new data going in that doesn't necessarily match what your expectations were coming out. So you have to find that, or you find it during go live, and that's never a good time to find a whole bunch of data problems.
Yeah.
And then secondarily, as you are doing this, your configuration is moving. So the data coming out, if you're not testing it, it's possible that configuration change happens and it blows up your data migration and you never know it. So
Yeah.
that's one reason for those industrial instances of attempting to migrate the data as much and as often as possible during the implementation. And that drives up the cost, but it also drives down the risk at go live on your data migration. So that large implementation I was talking about, I had 8 to 10 people. We ran 24/7 for 3 days to get all that data in. We got extremely, well over 99.9% of that data in
Yeah.
at go live, and I had a lot of very junior people that were working with me, and I was working on the overnight shift, and we finished on the overnight shift doing the load. We got done, we were stepping away, we were kind of pulling everything together. They looked at me and I said, that was just like every other Tuesday. And I'm like, well, yeah, that's kind of what it's supposed to be like, guys. That's why we practiced it as much as we did, is so that there wouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah.
There's enough other things to go wrong without letting something as important as your data migration ride before it gets done.
Yeah. So for companies moving from Great Plains to either BC or FNO before their deadline is up, what makes the data migration challenge unique for them, and how should they be preparing now?
So it's going to be the same whether they go to BC or F&O. The data structures are just very different. A lot of organizations on Great Plains are finance only. That was one of the strengths of Great Plains, where it was the capabilities that they had within finance. A lot of the challenge that they're going to run into is they're smaller organizations. Again, they don't have as many people to look at that data, to put eyes onto it and to test it and make sure that it's correct and go fix that data. If you find things that are a problem, especially problems in the source data, right, within Great Plains itself. So I think that's going to be one of the biggest problems in the Great Plains move is the lack of people to go in and do those things, because those organizations, most of them are going to be much smaller than what you get with with either a BC or an F&O.
Yeah. Okay. Then last, just another topic. I know we're touching on a lot of different things here, but I wanted to touch on this one as well by looking forward. You mentioned, and I think even Satya mentioned, that agentic ERP could eventually become the norm, where users tell the system what they want done rather than clicking through the screens. For a company implementing today, how should they be thinking about this 5 to 10 year horizon when making platform decisions?
So we talked about the MCP server earlier, MCP
Yeah,
2.0 for finance and supply chain management. And that is, again, going to be the key to agentic ERP as Microsoft is defining it. And frankly, in some ways, as other other ERP organizations such as SAP and Oracle are going to define it. So I think part of the challenge that you see is because Microsoft has put so much time into this MCP server and will continue to push it. And let me be clear, Satya didn't say he thinks it's going here. He says this is where we are taking it. It wasn't a I think this is where it's going to be. This is what I have all of the resources that are going into this working towards, is to have this agentic ERP. Organizations that are going into it now, need to consider their platform. Again, the platform's not going to matter in an agentic world. It's going to write to the correct back end and things of that variety. But the challenge you're going to run into is, while Microsoft is putting some agentic work into BC, and they're working very hard to make BC a solid platform to be able to migrate into, especially for all of those people on Great Plains, or a lot of those people on Great Plains, they are not putting in the same type of resources from a agentic standpoint as they are into F&O. So I truly feel that eventually F&O is going to be their agentic champion, so to speak. It's going to be the back end everybody's going to go to. Nobody's going to know it, because everybody's going to be working through that agentic front end in the long term. But it's certainly a consideration to have, because there'll be a migration from BC into that FNSCM structure as time moves forward. Now that could be probably is several years down the line. Having said that, as fast as AI is moving, for all I know, it's going to be next week. They tend to move very quickly with that stuff. But it does, in my mind at least, put an expiration date on how long Microsoft is going to continue to put resources into BC once they get that agentic front end working. And for organizations that are implementing right now, looking for opportunities to get your people doing agentic, work with the agents that Microsoft has out of the box, creating your own agents, which can be very simple actually with Copilot Studio, and working in that way where instead of figuring out I need to fill this piece of information into this box and this piece of information over here and click this button and do that, your people are figuring out, okay, I need to pay this vendor on this invoice, and you tell the system to do that, and it goes off and creates all of those transactions. And rather than your person who is probably very integral to your business doing a lot of this, let's be honest, grunt work, it's data entry work, typing the information in a particular way, they're able to move on to the next thing, whatever it may be, Every organization I've ever been in has people that can't get to some piece of important work, something that they feel is going to take them to that next level. These agents are an opportunity. It's one of the reasons that we originally started doing integrations. It's one of the reasons that we do automations, is to take away the mundane work from people. And agents are just a ramp up of that activity.
Yeah.
It's scaring a lot of people. They think their job is going away. Don't be as afraid of that as you think they might be. People thought the same thing when computers came out, and we all have jobs still. The job will change, but the knowledge that you have is going to allow you to get into agents. And organizations need to realize that. They need to start bringing their people into that. They need to take those first steps while they're implementing to do the change, since you're doing change already anyway. Make the change and start moving there.
Yeah. The roles will become a bit more strategic if the agents will take over the mundane work. It allows you to start thinking about business improvements and how to do things better, because now you're freed up.
Absolutely.
The role will change a bit, but you'll be in the same subject matter.
And you've seen, you've might have heard all of the doomsday predictions of, there's going to be a 40% drop off on positions, and there's going to be how horrible it's going to be moving forward and things of that sort. And if you roll back to the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s with the .com and computers getting into everything, and they said the same thing, and it really turned into about a 4 to 5% drop off, immediate drop off, which then bounced back to a lot more than that. Working. So yes, it'll be strategic. It'll be thinking about how to do a little bit. It'll allow you to interact with your customers more. And still get all of the information necessary to do a better job interacting with your customers.
And if I can ask one clarifying question, because the way I understood it, and again, I'm not a technical person here, but the way I understood what you were saying earlier is that you predict that eventually it will be F&O that will be what the agentic AI will be fronting, and BC will kind of go away. I'm oversimplistic terms.
That's my prediction of where it eventually goes. I am of the feeling that Microsoft again will spend in the short term on BC because of other products that are going away, Great Plains. But in the long run, FNSCM is Microsoft's horse in this race, and they're gonna be spending heavily to have the proper agentic framework around F&O to continue to do that work. And again, BC will get some of that. There are pieces of it that, just because of the way the two architectures are similar and things like that, that will allow them to do some of that work within BC. They recognize that, again, it's a big people change. Some of it will go to BC. I do not believe in the long term that's where Microsoft is going to go. They're going to spend a ton of money in F&O getting this agentic front end up and running, and then eventually what they will end up doing is spending less and less and less on BC and moving people over into the agentic ERP.
Does that then already change your recommendations to GP customers, or should GP customers already take this into consideration with their decision making, or is it too early?
I think it's part of the consideration as you go forward. I truly believe there's 5 to 7% of the GP customers that frankly should be going to FNSCM anyway. Whether it's because of how big they are, the complexity, how many different systems they're working in already. Maybe they were only using GP for finance and they've got 3 or 4 other operational systems that could be subsumed by F&O, things of that variety, conversations that should be happening with clients. I don't think it's an automatic assumption for every GP customer that BC is the best solution for them to go to, even though that's really what all of the noise is out there, is move you right to BC and it won't be I don't necessarily agree that that is 100% the case. And then another factor again is the long term. If you fall on that line and you don't have a real deciding factor between the two, but then you go, but
Yeah,
you know,
yeah,
it makes sense to me that it's going to be FNSCM in the long run. Then perhaps that is what makes the decision.
yeah,
FNSCM is more expensive. I'm not going to deny that. It's also a lot more capable.
yeah,
So it's a matter of finding that balance. It's a matter of making the right business case, and it is a piece of that business case is, am I going to be respending on this to move to FNSCM anyway?
in a decade.
And
Yeah,
yeah, right.
yeah. Thanks so much for everything that you've shared. Again, there's so much that you've so many bigger topics. If anyone watching this has even more questions now and they want to have a discussion with you, how can they reach you?
Well, they are more than welcome to email me at michael.petersen at next365group.com. I'm certainly willing to have that conversation and bring the right people into that conversation. I am the North America CTO for Next365 Group, although we also have different organizations within different countries.
Hmm.
So don't be afraid if you're not in North America to reach out, and I'll put you in touch with the right people. We've got Europe, Australia, so we've got different groups, and we
Yeah,
can put you in touch with people near you. To be able to have those conversations, and frankly, people that might understand country-specific business challenges that you might be running into.
yeah. Well, thanks so much for sharing. Um, I'm sure there will be more topics coming up in the future where you'd be an excellent person to do a deep dive with. But until then, good luck
Well,
with all the projects and with your pastries as well.
thank you very much, Rory. Thank you for having me.
All right, thank you, Michael. Bye. Thanks for watching another episode of Dynamics Compass. I started doing the podcast because in my work as a recruiter, I was speaking to all these Dynamics decision makers that had the same kind of questions. So I figured, well, I have a big network of Microsoft Dynamics experts. Why don't I just approach them, interview them, record it, and make all the answers freely available? So if there's a question that you really want answered that is Dynamics related, let me know. Find me on LinkedIn or write to me on rory@thegoodtalent.co, and I'll find the expert, I'll interview them, and make it freely available so you're informed and you can keep progressing your Microsoft Dynamics journey. Thanks so much for watching. I hope you have a great day. Bye.